He looked you in the eye and lied to your face. He told you this was about safety, about law and order, but he took your brother. These were the words whispered into a terrified girl's ear just moments before she stepped into the brightest lights in the world to confront the most powerful man on the planet. But what happened next was something no one, not the activists, not the media, and certainly not the girl herself, could have ever seen coming. The air in the auditorium crackled with energy. It was a nationally televised town hall, a high-stakes event focused on one of the most contentious issues of the day: border security and immigration. President Donald J. Trump was on stage, taking questions, his familiar, commanding presence filling the room. He had just finished explaining the rationale behind his administration's aggressive new stance against the cartels, designating them as terrorist organizations. The moderator, a seasoned journalist, scanned the audience. "We have time for one last question," she announced, her eyes landing on a woman in the third row who was waving her hand frantically. "Yes, you, ma'am." A woman with a severe haircut and a self-assured smile stood up. She wasn't there to ask a question for herself. Beside her, she guided a young girl, maybe 13 years old, to the aisle microphone. The girl was trembling, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, her frame swallowed by a worn denim jacket. In her hands, she clutched a photograph, its edges frayed and creased. Standing just behind her was a little boy, her brother, also in a denim jacket, looking around with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Mr. President," the activist began, her voice dripping with performative concern, "this is Sandra. She has something she needs to ask you." The woman placed a hand on Sandra's shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look supportive but felt more like a push. All cameras swiveled to the small girl. Her face was pale, her dark eyes glistening with unshed tears. She looked from the activist to the blinding stage lights, then finally at the president. "Mr. President," she began, her voice barely a whisper, cracking with emotion. You talk about making America safe." Her bottom lip quivered. She held up the photograph. It was a school picture of a teenage boy with a kind smile. "This is my brother Marco. He was a good person. He never hurt anyone." Tears began to stream down her cheeks. "But last month, your men came. They took him. They said he was gone because of your new laws." "You took my brother from us," she cried out, her voice finally finding its strength in a wave of grief. "Why? Why did you take him?" A collective gasp went through the audience. The press section erupted in a frenzy of whispers and furiously typing thumbs. The activist, Ms. Albright, wore a look of grim satisfaction. The ambush was perfect. It was a devastatingly emotional scene, a grieving child accusing the president, live on every network. The moderator, flustered, tried to intervene. "Thank you for your question. We should probably—" But President Trump raised a hand, silencing her instantly. He didn't get angry. He didn't fire back with statistics or political talking points. For a long moment he was completely still, his gaze fixed on the crying girl. He wasn't looking at a political opponent. He was looking at a child in pain. He saw her genuine sorrow, the raw terror in her eyes, and he saw the small boy, Mateo, hiding behind her, peeking out with a look of pure confusion. Then he did the last thing anyone expected. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice calm and surprisingly gentle, cutting through the tension in the room. "Come up here." He gestured to the stage. Security aides tensed, but he waved them off. "You too," he added, looking at the little boy. "Both of you, come on up." The activist, Albright, looked momentarily panicked. This wasn't part of the plan. She tried to hold Sandra back, but the girl was already moving, drawn forward by the president's unexpected invitation. Mateo, holding his sister's hand, walked beside her, his earlier fear now replaced by a boyish curiosity. He looked up at the massive stage, the lights, and the president, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. As they reached the stage, Trump met them. He didn't stand over them. He crouched down slightly, bringing himself to their level. He looked directly into Sandra's tear-filled eyes. The image was striking. The powerful leader, in his dark navy suit and red tie, now focused entirely on these two children. He gently placed a hand on Sandra's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "It's okay," he said softly. "Look at me. What's his name again?" "Marco," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. Marco, Trump repeated, nodding slowly. He looked at the worn photograph she was still clutching. And you believe we deported him? Sandra nodded, fresh tears falling. That's what Ms. Albright told us. Trump's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second toward the activist in the audience, a flash of cold steel in his gaze, before returning his attention to the children. He turned to one of his senior aides, Kash, who had quickly moved to the side of the stage. Kash, the president said, his voice low but clear enough for his microphone to pick up. Get me everything you have on a boy named Marco. His sister's name is Sandra. I want to know where he is. I want to know what happened to him. And I want to know now. Use every resource we have. Kash nodded and disappeared backstage. An electric silence fell over the auditorium. The town hall had ground to a halt. This was no longer a political debate. It was a live investigation, a real-time drama playing out for the entire country to see. Ms. Albright, the activist, was no longer smiling. She stood frozen in the aisle, a deer caught in the headlights. Her perfectly crafted narrative was being ripped from her control. To fill the silence, and to calm the children, Trump did something even more remarkable. He turned his attention to the little boy, Mateo. So what's your favorite subject in school? He asked, his tone now warm and conversational. Mateo, no longer shy, piped up. Gym! And I like baseball. Baseball, huh? A man's sport. You a good hitter? Trump asked with a grin. I hit a home run last Tuesday, Mateo said proudly. A home run! See that? Trump said, looking out at the audience. We've got a future all-star right here. He kept them talking, asking about their lives, their school, their friends. He was drawing a protective circle around them, shielding them from the prying eyes of the world while his team worked furiously behind the scenes. Sandra's sobs subsided into quiet sniffles. She watched the president interact with her brother, a look of profound confusion on her face. This wasn't the monster she'd been told about. This was a man who was laughing with her little brother. Minutes felt like hours. The tension was unbearable. Finally, Kash reappeared, holding a thin manila folder. He handed it to the president. Trump opened it, his face serious once more. He read the first page, then the second. As he read, his expression hardened, not with disappointment, but with a cold, controlled fury. He closed the folder and looked up, but he didn't look at Sandra. He looked directly at Ms. Albright. Ms. Albright, he said, his voice booming through the auditorium, devoid of its earlier warmth. You are an executive with the American Rights Initiative, are you not? A group that receives millions in funding from organizations dedicated to undermining our government. You found this family, you heard their story, and you saw a political opportunity. He took a step forward. You told this little girl, this grieving child, that my administration had thrown her brother out of the country. You told her he was gone forever. You coached her on what to say. You put her and her little brother on national television to sell a lie. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. There's just one problem with your story, Ms. Albright. He turned back to Sandra, his voice softening once more. Sandra, he said gently, your brother Marco wasn't deported. He knelt down again, showing her the top page of the file. Your brother is a hero. Sandra stared at him, uncomprehending. A few months ago, the president continued, your brother witnessed members of the La Sombra cartel execute a rival. He saw everything. Most people would have run. They would have hidden. But your brother Marco did something incredibly brave. He went to the authorities. He testified against them. His testimony was the key to dismantling a cartel cell that was terrorizing your community, bringing poison into your neighborhoods. He let her absorb that. Because he testified, the cartel put a price on his head. They would have hunted him, and they would have hunted your family. My administration didn't deport your brother, Sandra. We put him into the witness protection program. We saved his life. The truth washed over Sandra's face. The tears of sorrow were replaced by tears of shock, of disbelief, and then of overwhelming relief. The photograph in her hand was no longer a tragic memorial. It was the picture of a brave young man. Her brother was alive. Her brother was a hero. Ms. Albright knew this, Trump said, his voice like ice as he glanced back at her. Our federal agents informed the family's contacts, and we have the records to prove it. But she chose to hide that truth from you. She chose to let you believe your brother was gone, to let you suffer, because your pain was useful to her. The auditorium erupted. The crowd was on its feet, not with political anger, but with a unified sense of outrage at the deception. Ms. Albright, pale and exposed, was being escorted out by security, her public spectacle now a public disgrace. President Trump turned his back on the chaos. He was focused only on the children. "Sandra," he said, his voice full of sincere empathy, "I am going to make you a promise. I will personally oversee this. We are going to arrange for you and Mateo and your parents to be safely and secretly reunited with Marco. Your family will be whole again, and it will be safe. You have my word." He stood up, and for the first time that night Sandra looked up at him not with fear or grief, but with profound, tearful gratitude. Little Mateo, beaming, reached out and tugged on the president's suit jacket. In that moment, on that stage, under the glare of 1,000 lights, a family's deepest fear was turned into their greatest hope, not by a politician, but by a leader who refused to let a lie stand. What do you think was going through the president's mind when he made that final promise to the family? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. And for more stories that show what happens beyond the headlines, make sure you subscribe to our channel.